Thank you and good evening. Welcome to Rock Around the Clock. We are the Hinsdale Encore Rocks Chorale. Our band are the Unity Temple Players, and we're so happy that you're here to share this fabulous music and to cheer on the performers. I'm going to weave a little rock and roll history into the program just to give you some background. The classic Rock Around the Clock was actually the B-side to a Decca Records single by Bill Haley and his Comets. This song was recorded in about 30 minutes on April 12, 1954. At the end of the session, it was mostly taken up with the A-side, the novelty song 13 Women and Only One Man in Town, which mostly we don't remember nowadays. And if you're too young to remember what a B-side or a single is, ask one of the older people in the show and they'll let you know. Now, Danny Cedrone, whose guitar solo was one of the great things about that recording, struggled to come up with his solo part until the bass player, Marshall Lytle, said, just reuse the solo lick you had done for Rock This Joint, which he did. Now, the release of this single made it to number 23 on the Billboard charts in 1954. But what really got the song to take off was that it was used in the opening credits to the movie Blackboard Jungle. How many of you remember that movie? Released in 1955, starring Glenn Ford. And here's how that happened. Glenn Ford had a 13-year-old son named Peter, and he was a rock and roll fan while they were making the movie. Director Richard Brooks came over and visited the Ford household from time to time and talked about the film. And they noticed that Peter had some rock and roll music sitting around, and they asked, would you please play some of this stuff for me? And the Rock Around the Clock kind of got into the director's ear, and so he picked that song to use in the movie. Right after the movie came out, the single was re-released, and it stayed at the #1 slot for 8 weeks in 1955. It climbed the charts again in 1974 when it was used in the film American Graffiti and on the theme for the TV show Happy Days. Moving on to our next song. In a 2002 interview with National Public Radio, Michelle Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas recalled how this next song, California Dreamin', came about. Originally from sunny California and newly married to John Phillips, Michelle was living in New York City in 1963. John would work on writing songs at night, and one morning he brought Michelle the first verse of this song. It was inspired by her sense of homesickness, and it was about longing to be in another place, a feeling that really comes through powerfully on the famous 1965 recording. Now, a few days beforehand, Michelle and John had visited St. Patrick's Cathedral, which inspired the second verse, stopped into a church. John didn't like churches, and he had bad memories of parochial school, but since he couldn't come up with anything better, he left it in. The other Papa, Denny Doherty, sang lead vocal, which today is mostly carried by our mighty alto section. Larry Pilon will echo the famous alto flute part on his keyboard. And now please sit back and enjoy an iconic moment in rock history arranged by another icon, the great choral arranger, Roger Emerson. This is California Dreamin'.